And in state after state, they're doing everything they can to stop black people, Latinos, poor people, young people, people with disabilities from voting. It's a blast from the Jim Crow past. I thought we had won that battle back in the 1960s. To see it rear its ugly head is such a great disappointment. It's one of the barriers that I intend to knock down.
That was Hillary Clinton speaking about voting rights in Houston, Texas this weekend. Joining us now on the set, the president of the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University School of Law and former director of speechwriting for President Bill Clinton, Michael Waldman. He's the author of the new book, The Fight to Vote. Mike Barnicle and Sam Stein still with us as well.
Michael, good to see you again.
Great to see you.
Always great to have you on. Tell us, why did you write this book now? Why is it important right now for people to read this?
Well, this is an election where these issues of who can vote and how are at the front of a lot of people. There are new voting laws in place in 16 states for the first time. The Supreme Court knocked down the heart of the Voting Rights Act. You hear candidates like we just did talking about it. Right. A lot of public concern, not just about voting rights, but about Citizens United, the role of money. Right. And I wanted to know, among other things, why now? And this is really a look at the history. So why now? Well, it turns out that this fight over who can vote, the fight to make a real American democracy, has been with us since the very beginning. It's been at the heart of politics, and it's always been rowdy and partisan and intense from the time of the founding till now. So this is really another moment, just like in the past, where we're fighting over kind of who can have their voice heard, and we see it in this election.
Mike.
So you were referring to the Shelby decision. 5-4 sets back the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Why don't we pick one state, let that one state be North Carolina, to spell out exactly what the Shelby decision resulted in?
Well, the Shelby decision, as you say, was this 5-4 decision. It said that now states could pass these new voting laws without worrying about whether they were going to be approved beforehand by the Justice Department. And in North Carolina, they cut back on early voting, but especially on the days where African-American churches voted on the Sunday before the election. They put in a new voter ID law, and they repealed public financing for judicial races, a whole host of things. We've seen laws like this all over the country, and a lot of people are fighting back. And this is, among other things, one of the reasons the Supreme Court nomination is going to be such a big issue in the election.
Why? A lot of people think that showing a driver's license when you go to vote is okay. They have no objection to that. Do you have an objection to that?
I'm actually for voter ID. I think it makes sense to show who you are. What a lot of people don't realize is about 11% of eligible voters don't have a driver's license. So you need to make it so that people have ID that they really have. And so actually I think you can do this in a way that doesn't make it harder for anyone to vote. But if you look back at the turn of the century, you look back at the whole sweep of history, a lot of times these voting laws, they look fine on their face, but they're very partisan and mischievous in their intent. And I think a lot of these new laws are that way too.
Sam Stein, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, the voter ID issue is complicated because a lot of the states that are requiring voter ID are not supplementing that requirement by allowing or having multiple locations open with multiple hours open for people to go and access and get a voter ID. So you are, in fact, disenfranchising a lot of people through these laws. What kind of infrastructure do states need to set up if they're going to have a voter ID requirement to at least allow those 11% of the population to fulfill that requirement?
Well, you need to make sure the offices that give out the IDs stay open. But actually, there are some exciting new developments. If we had automatic voter registration in this country, like the rest of the democratic world does, you would add tens of millions of people to the rolls, and you would curb any potential for fraud. And you've now seen states like California and Oregon and other places moving towards that. So I do actually think that when you look at the whole sweep, we're at a risk of moving backwards, but the general trend throughout the 2 centuries has been to expand the right to vote, to kind of push back on forces that have made it less meaningful for people to have their voices heard. When you look at the founders and the Constitutional Convention, they were debating on the right to vote, whether only white men with property should be allowed, and that should be in the Constitution. And you hear a lot of the rhetoric about that in the fight over Citizens United today. It's a fight that's been going on from the beginning.
And the fight to vote is on bookshelves today. Michael Waldman, congratulations.
Thank you.